Molo Sanbunani, hello, how's it? Shalom, good evening, Goeienaand. Good mentor, welcome to another episode of Liberty and Friends. That's right, Liberty and Friends. That means it is a Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Welcome to it. My name is Sikhle Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty, coming to you from the beautiful and rather peaceful tonight township of Umlazi, just outside Durban. I say rather peaceful. There's only been 15 gunshots that I counted this evening. So hey. So it's definitely a more peaceful evening than the usual. Welcome to it. As usual on the show, the only price of admission is for you to hit that like button. Do it right now. Do it right now. Do it right now, and you will literally feed. Let's see, what number should we put out today? You'll feed 100,000 kids in Africa. If you hit that like button right now, do it now. It's the only price of admission here on the BDL show and our various platforms. Speaking about various platforms, just be mindful, there will be a lot of background work being done as we look to relaunch this channel with new offerings. And basically, we were listening to you, the viewers, as to what you would like to see out of this channel. Lots of interesting stuff coming in that regard, including interesting content, and campaigns which I know you've been waiting for, and the planning of which is being finalized. For example, the Masakele campaign. But I'll get into all of that at the latter bits of the show. I am missing one of my guests. I'm hoping I can get him on the show tonight. Let me just quickly remind him in the background here. But with that being said, how are you doing? Let me know. How have you been? Get into the comment section. Remember, this show is a completely interactive show. Your comments and contributions will flight on the screen periodically. So get your comments in, guys. And let me know what you are thinking, especially as on this show, we wrap up the news week that was. And boy, oh boy, has it been an interesting week. Speaking about an interesting week, let me bring on my interesting guests who are here. I'm talking, of course, about the host of the Joe Emilio show, someone who's been rather busy out and about this week. And he'll talk to us exactly what I mean by that. I'm talking, of course, about Joe Emilio. There he is. Joe, good evening and welcome to Liberty and Friends.
Hello, good evening, Sikhle. Thank you so much for having me on your show once again. Glad to be here and excited to chat.
Good to have you, man. And another guest, a fellow who left a rather divided audience the last time he was on the show, but we always welcome because he does bring different perspectives, very good conservative perspectives. I'm talking, of course, about Hugo Kruger. Hugo, good evening. Welcome to LNF.
Evening, Sikhle, and thank you to the listeners. And thanks for the negative comments I received last time. I appreciated it.
Hey, man, it happens. Trust you me, it happens. That's how we roll on here because we do value, the good, the bad, and the ugly insofar as, freedom of thought and free speech. And, some people will agree, some people won't.
Exactly.
That's the beauty of the show. Fellas, we were scheduled to have Dumo Denga with us tonight. I've just messaged him in the background just to remind him. But until then, let's actually just get straight into it, to be honest, because, anybody who saw the headline, the header of this particular show would have known that, hey, man, we're going to discuss the spicy cough. And specifically the vaccine mandates and really the vaccine passports to it. And I call it the spicy cough because I don't want to say its name. YouTube is clamping down on channels again that are even discussing this particular topic. So just a fair warning to my panelists to be mindful of that. But I do want to discuss specifically the pushback we're beginning to see around the world on this particular issue as various populations across the world, from Australia to the Italians to the French, and even quite recently the Brazilians who took to the streets in scary numbers, are basically saying no to the authoritarian streak in which governments are responding to this virus on. Hugo?
Yeah, so here in France, it's now been, I think, 13 weeks of consecutive protests, and not a single media camera can find it, despite massive
That's
protests in front of
shocking.
the Champs-Élysées. I mean, I don't know what I'm looking at. But yeah, they call it here the La Passe de la Honte, the pass of shame. Macron's pass of shame. So yeah, I consider this to be an equivalent of the apartheid pass. Nobody in authority should be allowed to limit your freedom of movement. That being said, I'm a believer in the free market, and there's pushback in France. So, for example, if I eat at a restaurant and I am unclean, unvaccinated, the restaurant owner can ask me, do I want to sit in, show my pass? Do I want to eat out takeaways, or do I want to eat outside of his premise on his camping chairs that he's prepared to rent me out? And at the moment, a lot of French restaurant owners are renting out camping chairs, and you can sit outside completely legal and have your meal. You have to pay maybe €1 or so more for your meal, and you subtract it the other way around. So you're seeing a lot of that. People are breaking the laws. In the Netherlands, they are creating their own unvaccinated or vaccine passport-free communities. And it has to be said, a lot of people who are against the vaccine passport are vaccinated. Okay, this is not a question of whether you're vaccinated or not. This is a question: do you believe that people in authority should have a right to limit people's freedom of movement? Now, I just want to say this: there is no scientific reason for this vaccine passport. Why? According to Pfizer and Moderna's own data, the vaccine does not stop transmission.
Mm-hmm.
Rate of transmission is 0. It's not 10 or 20 or 30%, it's 0. So you are not protected by people being vaccinated or unvaccinated. It's individual protection. You yourself make the decision. And yeah, so I put it that way. There's
No,
no scientific
absolutely.
reason, it's a political reason.
No, absolutely. And again, I want us to get into this a little bit, even at the risk of channels being clamped down on, because, it does seem as though, and by the way, let me just set this out quite clearly insofar as my position. No one here denies that this virus exists. It does exist. I've demonstrated that insofar as I've gotten the antigen test myself that showed that I had SARS-CoV-2. And from that basis, Hugo, keep quiet.
There is a legitimate
Just kidding,
theory
just
called
kidding, just
terrain
kidding.
theory. Okay.
But hang on. Sorry, I just want to finish my thought, and I'll come back to you. Don't get me wrong. I lost my train of thought. I've shown that I had myself SARS-CoV-2, and we've clearly demonstrated, the data rather, has clearly demonstrated that this virus is more of a killer to those of us who are on the obese side of things, those of us who have pre-existing conditions. And if anything, the response should have been to look out for and to pay particular attention to those individuals who are just not healthy. For the overwhelming majority of South Africans, overwhelming majority of the world population who are healthier, it'll be mild to no symptoms for them. We now know this. So that it has begged the question, I'll come back to you, Hugo. It now begs the question of why do we continue with the authoritarianism that we're seeing, where there's an insistence on lockdowns, number one, and from those lockdowns, a segue to this idea that politicians should have control in perpetuity. Ooh, yikes. Insofar as controlling movement, telling people where they can and can't be, based on whether you have a piece of paper called this vaccine passport. And Hugo, to this particular point, and I'll come to you, Joe, after Hugo, here in Cape Town, just this weekend, there was a rather large protest in the Sea Point Promenade of South Africans who are joining the international community in saying no to the vaccine passport or even a mandate on this vaccine passport. And Hugo, you rightly said it's all politics.
Right. So first, so yeah, as to the virology, let's not go into the origin of that, because there is a legitimate theory disputing even if this is a new or novel virus, right? But as far as you said, it is correct that people who are at risk have a higher chance of dying and going to hospitalization. So if you have a sense of policy, you should perhaps vaccinate them. But there are risks involved to the vaccine as well, and I don't believe the government is honest or transparent about those risks either. Okay, so some people are unfortunately hurt by the vaccine. I use the word hurt in very inverted commas here, okay, because there's much more to this. But be that as it may, this is about politics and about control. What do they want to control? I don't know. There's a lot of interest at play. Right.
Mm.
I'm not sure who's behind. Some people have pointed to Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. Other people have pointed out to land reform. There's every fanatical ideologue has now got an opportunity to say, haha, I've got your vaccine passport. You're going to do what I say. Otherwise, you don't have access to ABC. We're hearing stories of digital banks wanting central currencies, for example.
Mm.
And if you don't take your shots every 6 months sickly, you're a bad boy. That means I'm going to close your bank account, for example.
Mm.
This is where this nonsense can lead towards, right?
Mm.
It's an enormously dangerous tool. So
Mm.
I think we must protest it in its entirety. There is no justification nationally or internationally for this. This is not a yellow fever vaccination. This is not the same
Mhm.
ID card that they gave the British after the First World. This is comparable to the apartheid Dompa system. And any politician that does this has to be hounded out of town. I'm speaking to Alan Winde in the Western Cape. I've got little respect for that man at the moment. Get off this high horse, okay? If you want a massive backlash, get off it. And my prediction is this: you're going to see violence if you continue down this road. You're being bloody stupid. Stop the bus,
Well,
say we're not going to go along, and go ahead. Do what Florida is doing.
absolutely. I was about to say I was actually going to go to the Florida example because again, is that not just the oil and water or black and white comparison of the direction one politician can take versus the other? And insofar as South Africa, I think the propensity for our protests to become violent is much more pronounced, perhaps, than other parts in the world where people are a bit more, with all due respect, docile. I'll say this because I look at, for example, in France, in places like Italy, in places like Australia. Yes, they've gotten violent, but I mean, guys, their version of violence versus what can happen in ours in these sort of protests are markedly different. But the one bit of violence that I want us to speak about, Hugo, and Joe, I'll come to you actually on this because you had an example of it this weekend. The majority of the violence that we've actually seen has come from the state and police in particular on citizens who are trying to voice their freedom of speech to protest either a vaccine passport or a vaccine mandate. And you got a taste of that this weekend with a funny video clip also of the attempt at the very least of the South African police service to effectively violently break up that protest.
Right. So you're completely correct. I mean, the violence is perpetuated by the states and the politician, and it's not just the violence; it is the rhetoric that goes with it. I mean, if anyone speaks in South Africa to a white or a black minority in the language that they're using against the protesters, they are anti-vax, they are filthy, they are unclean. This is the language of delegitimization. This is the language of Rwanda, and I'm really honest about this. This is the language of dehumanizing people to the point where you're saying, I'm allowed to do anything to somebody because he does not want me to violate his bodily integrity. That is the line in the sand we need to draw. We need to tell them, sorry, guys, you are going too far. Get off this high horse. And any politician who can still hang on to it, they say they don't deserve our respect, they don't deserve the election, we need to hound them out of town. And it goes for the scientists who know better, okay, who are perpetuating the lie that we need to all be vaccinated against this. That's a complete lie, okay? Those at risk, there's a good case to make that they should be. Let's keep it that way, right? It's individual choice for anyone, but there is no scientific reason for everyone to be vaccinated. That's a complete lie.
And let me come to you. Sorry, I really want to give Joe an opportunity to come in because, Joe, as I was setting up earlier on, and I wanted you to actually jump in, it's that violence, as I said, from the state against citizens that we're beginning to see. And there's almost a relishing of it to an extent, because those who see themselves as being on the, quote, right side of the issue seemingly have no problem, as Hugo said, on seeking state violence against you in order to enforce their way of seeing things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like yesterday at the protest, I was there quite early before it actually started. People were gathering on the Sea Point Promenade. There was already a few speeches getting everybody hyped up in terms of just like good music, music that goes along with like a march against something. Like we're not gonna take it. There was all good vibes and stuff like that. And then already you could see a large amount of police gathering. They were having like meetings, they were huddling together. I tried to record them. They're very angry that I was recording them. And right from the get-go, as people started marching down that promenade, we were just being followed. It didn't feel like the cops were trying to protect us necessarily. I mean, they were, but at the same time, it felt like we were being stalked by them. They were just all of a sudden, a water cannon just appears out of nowhere, comes onto the grass, gets as close as it can to the protesters, and gives them a warning saying, you're not abiding by lockdown regulations, you're not wearing masks, you're not social distancing, which is ironic because this is an anti-lockdown / anti against vaccine mandates and vaccine passports and vaccine certificate protests. So it's obviously that's the situation. They tried 3 times to stop these protesters. Once while they were marching, once again while they were marching with the water cannon, but that was the funny clip that I put out because the water cannon actually broke down. It wasn't working anymore. And you could see the cop in frustration, like,
great living in South Africa.
Getting it. Yeah. The one time I was actually thankful for the SAP's corruption and for them not maintaining their machinery. And then the third time was towards the end of the protest where the cops actually just again told everyone they must disperse, and then they walked into the crowd. But the people stood their ground. They got up into the cops' faces and they said, like, why are you even here? Like, we're allowed to protest. They were way under 2,000 people as per lockdown regulations. And yeah, they were just talking. No, there was no looting. There was no riots. There was no violence whatsoever. Even when the cops came straight face to face with these protesters. Yes, the protesters were shouting, but it was the cops actually that it felt like they were trying to antagonize the people and the protesters, because the protesters again were just having their voices heard. That's
absolutely. In fact,
isn't that a tactic? If I'm just getting there, that's a tactic as well. They try and instigate the protesters to show a violent reaction. Then you put the camera on and say, these are a bunch of fanatical anti-vaxxers, right?
Yeah.
That is the tactic they're using.
Let's get to that in a second. I just want to introduce our third guest this evening. He is here. There he is. With a new haircut too. Hey, Dumo, welcome to the BDL show. Liberty and Friends. How you doing, homie?
I am good. Apologies for being late, but I'm glad to be here. Yes. Thanks.
Good to have you on. In fact, you've just joining us at the part of the conversation where, again, what we're focusing on here is the response that we're beginning to see around the world to proposals of either A, vaccine passport, or B, a vaccine mandate. We had a debate on the BDL show last Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken, between Ivo Vegter, Jonathan Katzenellenbogen, and sorry, Jonathan's surname always sort of catches me off guard. It's so long. And of course, those who were on the side of the debate against either a mandate or a passport were Chris Hatting and Martin van Staden from the Free Market Foundation. If you want to see that debate, it's on the BDL channel, whether you watch on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. But, Dumo, one of the things I was just saying earlier on, and Hugo actually make mention of it now, is there almost seems to be a wanting of there to cast one side off as being radical crazies versus the other who are yoked to the state, invariably, as being the moderate, trust us, trust the science type arguments. There's definitely a polarization here that's happening that's actually not necessary, to be honest.
Right. The polarization favors those who are trying to push their agenda. It's just easy to place in someone's mind that the people who are let's say protesting against vaccine mandates, it's easy to label them as as anti-vaxxers and so forth, which may be an incorrect characterization. But it helps the political debate. It helps galvanize the supporters on the state side so that they can actually get things going for them. So it's really unfortunate that we're at that point where we are polarizing positions when the situation is a bit more complex than that. There are people that have legitimate reasons for not wanting vaccine mandates, but to characterize them as people that can't think is a very dangerous thing when it's a bit more complex than that. Definitely.
Absolutely. Or even characterizing them as anti-vaxxers, which is just completely not true. But I'm going to move on in a moment. There's one more thing that I want to prosecute on this particular issue, because we're beginning to see I should stop saying beginning. We're now seeing it's happening. Where here in South Africa, there is a move towards the mandating of this vaccine. Insofar as, just as a prime example, the SAFA, the South African Football Association, announced that entry to the stadium to watch the soccer game between Bafana, that's the South African national soccer side, and the Ethiopian side will be free to those who are vaccinated. And presumably those who are unvaccinated, you have to pay the full price and entrance to this. It does seem as though there is a priming. There is a priming of that, what Hugo described is effectively as a health dompas, in a sense of some can get into certain places and enjoy public amenities and others are simply unable to do more.
Yes, I would characterize this as a health dompas. It's funny that when the government actually decided that when they said they were going to introduce this what they call a vaccine certificate as entry to certain facilities and so forth. It's funny that they're saying something like this, yet they said no one will be forced to take the vaccine, and now we're in this position where SAFA, which I don't know if it's part of the South African government or whatever, but it seems like it's an independent football body. Now they're trying to encourage people to actually get the vaccine using this vaccine certificate. But you know what is ironic? They say people who got the vaccine, it would be free for them. And I thought it'd be a discounted price. But for me, it just shows that a lot of people are not interested in watching Bafana. Because if the entry is free for those who are vaccinated, clearly they're struggling to get people into the stadium. So, I mean, if they're a high demand team, you would understand they'll probably put a discount, let's say 40%, 20%, whatever. But now it's free. I don't know. It just shows desperation because I don't think they'll get much people getting in anyway.
And then people like him, and I'd rather take my chance with this virus and go watch Bafana.
I'll watch it at home.
But guys, let me wrap up the section. I'll come to Hugo and Joe just final comments because I want us to move on. Actually, no, hang on. I'm seeing some. Come on now, viewers. Let's hit that like button. You're not going to treat me like a $2 hole up in here, cheap $2 hole. Give me my likes, people. Give me my likes. Hit them like buttons. I want to see a 50% engagement. There's over 200 of us and growing, and only 30 likes across the platforms. Hit that like button right now, especially if you're enjoying this conversation. I am in conversation with Joe Emilio, who's the host of the Joe Emilio Show, Hugo Kruger, a writer and independent researcher. You'll find a lot of his writing on various platforms from Daily Friend. I think you've written for Daily Friend before.
No, I haven't.
Hugo?
It's Rational Standard mainly. And I wrote sometimes for international guys like Gillette. But for what it's worth, I have a podcast on Odyssey because I'm one of the guys they chucked out of YouTube for questioning the vaccine efficacy, even though I invited the inventor of the technology himself onto my podcast. So
well, there you go.
Find
what's the name of the podcast, Hugo?
Well, it's just my name, Hugo Kruger, on Odyssey.
Perfect. There you go. That's Hugo Kruger and the host of, the Hugo Kruger Show. I'll call it that. I'll add the show there for you, Kruger. And Dumo Denga, of course, the host of the Manpatria podcast and the new show that looks at issues through the Austrian perspective. What's that called again, Dumo? Remind us.
Yeah, it's called. That's what it's called. The Austrian perspective. Yes, that's correct.
Oh, there you go.
That's the name of the show.
There you go. Excellento. Again, news, analysis, and a commentary that you'll hear nowhere else other than here on Liberty and Friends. So hit that like button, please, people. I want to see my engagements going up. Speaking about engagements going up, actually, I must move us on because there's actually some meaty topics that I want us to get into, especially around this election, this local government election. And maybe before I do that, I am going to open up a couple of other avenues to broadcast on because, as I said, channels like YouTube and the existing guys are becoming ever restrictive. So you might see me on Rumble very soon, but I'll get into all of those details a bit later. Fellas, I want to move us on to, if I just quickly check my notes here. Pardon me, folks. Sorry, I'll get with you just now. Yes. A very, very interesting development this week, which really got the Cape Independence folk jumping for joy, if anything else. Hugo, I'll begin with you because I know you are a very big advocate for secessionist movements generally.
No, I'm actually against the Cape Independence, so it will offend half of your audience against. I think it's an utterly ridiculous
What?
idea.
Well, I support
How
it.
am I? How am I crossing my wires here? I've always assumed you're a big
I am
secessionist.
for federalism. I'm for devolution of power, but I think secessionist movements in the Western Cape are utterly ridiculous. According to their own polls, by the way, their own polls say that if secession would happen, there will be a massive racial divide. I think it's better to avoid that.
How did you read into that?
Well, 20% of the black population polled.
How did
only
you
20%
get that
of
from
them
that
want.
poll?
Only 20% of the black population polled want independence of the Western
Yeah, but you
Cape.
got to remember the demographics of the Western Cape.
Yeah, it's 30%, but still, you then step in on a minority.
No. The majority of Western Cape is colored. Then it's
Ding, ding, ding.
white, and then it's black.
Then it's
So
dictatorship of the
obviously, those
majority.
statistics are going to reflect the Western Cape demographics.
If they are 30% of the population, only 20% support them. That means that two-thirds of the
Western
black
Cape,
population
not of
of
South
the Western
Africa.
Cape do not support them. Okay, black
Yeah, well,
population
over
30%.
50% of DA
So-
supporters support Western Cape secession.
But the point here is it's not just about racial demographics. You need to decouple the energy system. You need to decouple the water system. You need to understand that South Africa was found along the mines of the Witwatersrand, meaning the transport in and out goes out of the country. These guys have just skipped over all the geographical obstacles, and I think we're going to have wonderful independence, and it's not going to be like Kosovo. I think it's utterly idiotic, and I think people have to reconsider their position.
And
All right, hang on.
I think your
set this up.
opinion.
Joe, just hang on. I want to set this up nicely because this I want to hear. This debate I want to hear. Sunday Night Raw. Good people, welcome to it. If you're watching, we're actually getting into a rather heated debate, thankfully, on this particular issue. I wish I had actually had some of the voices who are great proponents of this, including Joe, by the way, to have a for and against. Because I know Hugo is a formidable voice on this, but let me set up why I raised this issue as to what happened this week. This week, an interesting development, the establishment of the Cape Town Stock Exchange. That's the Cape Town Stock Exchange, which will now be perhaps, who knows, if it grows, as competitive, if not more subscribed, pardon me, than the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Definitely, depending on how you view it, a development that speaks to that Cape independence crowd, arguing as they do that they can go it alone, so to speak. And that's not the only major investment that the Cape is about to see, which speaks to this notion of the Cape being able to go it alone. A new airport is also being proposed for that part of the world. But let me not waffle on this. Let me come back to this particular debate. And Joe, you wanted to chime in because Hugo's basically making the point there. Well, hang on, there's two massive considerations. The data itself out of the proponents of this is suggesting a bit of polarization racially, a charge that Hugo is making. And the second charge, which I actually agree with, speaks to the nitty-gritties of this. Has this really been thought out insofar as South Africa, as Hugo rightly says, was designed to be a facilitator, the periphery provinces to be a facilitator of what happens in the interior provinces, i.e. the mining industry in particular, an economy that's heavily yoked still in that direction. How would you respond to this?
All right. So, firstly, secession needs to happen step by step. I think some of the concerns that Hugo has brought up is warranted. I mean, you're right. Everybody always asks us about the Cape secession. Yeah, but what about this? What about your borders? What about this? What about that? But at the moment, there are things that are happening, like we just mentioned, like the Cape Town Stock Exchange, which would give a very strong economy for the Western Cape. And I think at this stage, to get to secession, there are certain steps that you need to take. And right now, the independent Capes or the Western Cape secession movement is focusing on the referendum. There is no secession, there is no democracy, if I can put it that way, without that referendum. None of that, the stuff you're worried about the future, happens until that referendum, until the people vote for what they want. That is the most important thing. The thing that I take exception to is for you to say that this is racially charged when especially Cape independent advocacy groups, particularly them, maybe other groups, but particularly Cape Independence Advocacy Group, have made it their mission to make sure that it is not racially charged. That's why they put out those statistics. And you have to take the Western Cape demographics into consideration, not the entire of South Africa, because this entirety of South Africa can't vote in that referendum. It'll only be the Western Cape people that will vote for that referendum. And if that referendum goes through, and if that referendum is voted for and the majority say, yes, we want secession, then we can have those discussions. But there's a lot of steps until that point, because only after that referendum, I think, and I stand under correction because I'm not in the team of Cape Independence Advocacy, meaning I don't work for them in this regard, so I don't know all the details, but I would imagine that they do have a plan, but right now their focus is that referendum. And yeah.
Hugo, before you respond, I wanted to grapple with this comment on the screen here from Kevin. Hugo, the other resources that you refer to in South Africa, they're being mismanaged and corrupted. I mean, look at Eskom as the example that Kevin cites. How worse off could the Western Cape really be without such SOEs that are really charging citizens excessive rates whilst not delivering on a reliable product and service? Hugo, the central question here being, well, isn't the whole point of breaking away the secession to not be yoked to that interior, to not be yoked by the failing state?
I think everyone is yoked by the failing state, and including failing municipalities in the Western Cape. It might be a little bit better in the Western Cape, given that they might have a better government, but that makes a question for federation. It doesn't make an argument for secession. Gauteng still provides the majority of South Africa's GDP. Johannesburg is still the richest city, and Pretoria is next to it. Western Cape comes in, I think, at 14% of South Africa's GDP. They will take a massive punch in the face if they do this to themselves, right? They have to be honest about it. They are promising sunshine and roses. It's typical secessionist propaganda. Guys, let's just be independent and all the problems will be solved. They have not thought it through. To Joe's point about the polls. Okay, I've got the polls in front of me. 62.3% of the colored population in the Western Cape, assuming they polled only there, want independence. 78% of the white population in the Western Cape want independence. Only 21% of the black population want independence. They still make up 10 to 20% of the Western Cape's population. I'm not sure on the exact statistics. The point is, it is going to be a racially charged landmine that is best to be avoided.
Yeah, but the only people that are going to make it racially charged are the ANC. I'll agree with you on that. The ANC will make it a racially charged issue, and they're already trying to with mainstream media. Cape Independence Advocacy Group has made it very clear it's not racially charged, and you can see it in the marches, you can see it in the data, and you can see it when people talk about Cape secession. The majority is colored and white and black and all these. It's a mix.
But yet they cannot convince the majority of the black people in the Western Cape to want secession, despite the propaganda and the PR campaign they've got.
Plus one. So, I mean, if you have...
It's 20% at the moment, so they need to work a little bit hard on Khayelitsha. I don't buy it. I just think it's going to be dangerous. I think that people are doing it, believe in fantasy land, and it's kind of a way they don't want to escape the real problems of South Africa. And look, by all means, I'm from Polokwane, right? I'm from the north. I'm not from the Western Cape. I always said that, if global warming is real, it'd be a great thing because Cape Town will be underwater. I really don't care two flies if Cape Town goes, right? I just think they're utterly naive about the challenges ahead of them. And I don't think that the people managing the Cape Independence, like all secessionist movement, will be able to manage the economy afterwards. Because usually revolutionaries, for lack of a better word, don't know how to manage anything, right? They're usually bad. So you can have an ANC 2.0 in the Western Cape. These are things that are just best to be avoided. The real challenge to me is South Africa's challenge. Fine, I'm for a federal government. I'm all for saying the Western Cape needs more powers to manage its own police force, to manage this and that. I'm all for the devolution of power. But the beautiful thing in a federal system is you can move from one state to another if the one place is crappy. California is turning into a crappy hellhole under Gavin Newsom. Great migration's going to Florida. Brilliant place. I stay in Paris. I'm a globalist, right? I believe in globalization, not Klaus Schwab's version, but the idea that you can move around to where you want to be. I stay in Paris at the moment. If Paris becomes crappy under Macron, I can go to Belgium, right? I can go back to South Africa. That is the world that I like living in. But I don't like this idea of thinking that we can have separation in isolation. I think it's a fantasy, and it doesn't work. I look at the record of secessionist movements worldwide. They've got a horrible track record. Violence in Catalonia last year, 2 years ago, I was there. I remember the violence in Barcelona. Not something to repeat. Kosovo, a horrible situation. If you think secession can happen without violence, show me an example. Because the weight of history is against you.
Yeah, but also I think you're taking a few liberties there. Hugo, I want to play devil's advocate for both arguments, because the violence comes from who is the question one has to ask, right? Invariably, often. Well, there you go. So, it's not so much
Which
that
is
the
the point I made.
secessionists themselves. So I was about to say, it's not so much that the secession and secessionists themselves are predisposed to violence, but rather the very state that they're arguing they want to escape is inclined to respond in a violent way. So again,
Look,
it's a bit of a moot
can I
point,
just-
but it's an important point insofar as the issue isn't the secessionists, but the state itself, the institution of the state. And
Yeah.
ironically, the very people who are fleeing it are arguing that they shouldn't be yoked to what's becoming these bigger states that are ever increasingly unaccountable. And ironically, they make the argument by saying maybe you should have smaller governed regions. In this case, a Cape independence. And trust you me, don't be surprised if you hear in the next couple of months a louder voice that speaks of KZN independence too. There are rumblings in this province for this kind of independence movement. Sadly, though, as a final comment, and I'll come to you, Joe, and then Dumo. Sadly, though, insofar as the KZN rumblings, there's two distinct factions. There's the ANC yoked Zuma faction, which want to do it because they argue the broader ANC is trash, and we can go it alone as a Zuma or Zulu ANC, which is trash. And then there's the original, the traditional secessionists in this part of the world. I actually argue that Zulus have a distinct culture, a distinct identity, a distinct sense of nationhood, which actually should be reinvoked, not as a Zulu nationalist state, but actually just as a state under a king. So much like you have, for instance, I'm trying to think of a functional kingdom, much like you have the Brits, to a large extent. The monarchy won't necessarily be running the day-to-days. There will be a parliamentary system or a democracy underneath it, but it's still a kingdom. Let me come to Joe, Dumo, then you, Hugo, just to wrap up the arguments you'll hear.
All right. So in closing, I guess.
No,
Look,
not necessarily.
I'll be-
keep it going if you have distinct points you want to make.
I'll be honest, and something that maybe all of them, Cape Exits and the whole crew of Cape Independence, the one thing that I've always been on the opinion of is that it will cause violence. I'm not an idiot, but it's not like BDL said. It's not necessarily the secessionists that are going to cause it. It's the state that's going to cause it. ANC is not going to let go of the Western Cape. We all know this. I'm a realist about it. We know how they operate. ANC will not give up Western Cape. So there more than likely will be a fight. I'm willing to fight. A lot of other people are willing to fight. There are successful stories like Singapore, for example, that is doing very well at the moment. As a matter of fact, Helen Zille went to visit it and came back and wanted to talk about it and talk about how they made a great success out of it. And so there are possibilities for it. And here's the thing. This is where I stand. Everybody wants to know where I stand on it. I support Cape Independence because it's, Hugo says it's a naive way of thinking. Fine, fair enough. So it's a naive way of thinking of getting rid of the ANC. But I believe in even federalism. I really do. Anything that just says footsec ANC, I'm going to support. All right. So that's where I stand on the whole issue. For me, Cape Independence is another solution to the already troubled, lawless, just forgotten country that is South Africa. All right. And whether you want to support Cape Independence or you want to say footsec ANC or you want to vote IFP or you want to vote DA or you want to vote whoever else besides ANC and EFF, then all power to you. Go vote at the municipality elections. Go vote at the national elections. And I'm going to still fight for Cape Independence. Because fuck the ANC. And I'm using every option I have at my disposal to make that work. That's where I stand.
Dumo, your thoughts on this? Sorry, man. We sort of sidelined here. You saw these two bulls going at it.
Yes.
But your thoughts, dude. Like, what does this boil down to? Is this genuinely a liberty issue? And is it one which people who are on the side of freedom should be advocating for, or even if it's indirect or direct advocacy? Is this a logical conclusion to a country like South Africa, or, as Hugo puts it, and I think a lot of us fall in this category, a more federal arrangement might be more preferable? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, from what I've seen, I think the ANC are both opposed to a federalized solution and secession as well. They're opposed to both, because I think there was one politician, I forgot his name, who mentioned that he actually referred to this Cape independence as federalism, and said that federalism and actually put federalism in a bad light. So I think for me, I mean, what I would like is a federal state, or even secession, if possible, if it can be managed correctly. But I think the idea of South Africa staying the way it is a question that everyone has to answer, because at the end of the day, what you have, again, you got an ANC government that's failing. People don't want to be part of it anymore. They want to move away from it. And some will say we'll either go to the secession route, and some will say we should have the more federal route. But either way, either route the ANC doesn't want, because they want total control. So we just need to, I think at some point, if you're gonna go the federal route, which is like the most likely option, then we need to have some good convincing along the way. We need to convince the ANC that the federal route is better, and so forth. But the reality is that it's going to be tough. Either way is going to be tough. But I'm looking to see the progress being made on both fronts.
Well, this is where we come up against ideology here. Unfortunately, the ANC would never agree to either a federal or even a secessionist movement, simply because of who they are ideologically. The ANC ascribe to a Leninist notion of democratic centralism, which basically argues that all decisions are made by a central command team. That's why you saw the National Coronavirus Command Council being set up. It's very much in lockstep with who they are ideologically, and they would argue that actually you don't want to see a more federal South Africa, because all decisions, much like the Nats believed, should be made out of Pretoria by a national government. In fact, they've argued that South Africa isn't a federal state, it's a unitary state, is the argument as put forward by Tito Mboweni, who actually set the cat amongst the pigeons this week with a tweet to that particular extent. And Hugo, let me come to you, because there is a conversation here, and maybe just for full disclosure, I also do err on the side more of a federal South Africa, because I've always argued South Africa is not a natural country. It is a colonial project that was pieced together by colonialists. This is a country of distinct regions, different cultures, different practices, different languages even, and that this country might even be healthier if it had a greater sense of recognizing those regional differences. I'm just not necessarily opposed to a secessionist movement if that were the natural conclusion. Your final thoughts, Hugo?
Well, I mean, secessionist movement, they have freedom of expression. They can say what they want. So, I mean, great. I will see how they do in the elections. I don't think they're going to get far. On your point of federalism and union, the federal state and the union state, that is a debate that goes back all the way to when the Union of South Africa was formed. Back then, Jan Smuts was considering federal state or unitary state, and his argument was the same as Tito Mboweni today. A union state is much easier because you can make centralized decisions and you can make them quick and you can, implement them quick, and you don't have all this nitty-gritty gridlock that the American system has. A federal system has gridlock. Okay, the American system is very difficult to change. That's an advantage and sometimes a disadvantage. In South Africa, for better or for worse, have decided historically we want a unitary state. I don't think we decided, the politicians decided, because it's easier to make the decisions that way. My view is just I push constantly for devolution of power. I don't think the problem is necessarily federalism versus unionism versus this and that. I think the big problem is we have concentrations of power that are unjustified, right? So the point is, if a corporation like Pfizer comes in and he holds South Africa, they hold South Africa hostage because of their product, or they take our national assets, that's a concentration of power. That is just as bad as the ANC thinking they can make decisions left, right, and center. So I want people to change this mindset to say, if a company, or whether it's the banker, whether it's your boss, doesn't matter, if somebody abuses power and has a concentration of power, that power needs to be sort of decentralized. And I think that's happening in South Africa already. I mean, one of those believers that in a legal theory that it's not the people who follow the law, but it's the law that follow the people, right? So people are moving away from bigger cities. They're moving. There's a trend called semigration. We're seeing these gated communities all over South Africa. We're seeing signs of decentralization. So we'll see what the natural outcome of that is going to be. I don't think the route through to decentralization is through political change. I actually think it's through culture. It is through just doing what you want to do, to try and create the reality you want, tell the story you want to tell. And I think from following from that, the law will come later. The law always lags behind the people. What I am highly opposed to is the idea that we can vote in an independent Western Cape and think we can put up the borders overnight, right? Decouple the electricity and the water system and think there's going to be no violence, no food shortages, no problems along the way. And that if the violence and the stuff come, we can always blame the ANC. It's sort of going to create a new revolutionary problem. I tend to be against revolutionary change. I'm for constitutional change. If you can do it through the legal system, all the best. But, these guys selling ideas of freedom and independence, I want them to actually be there when the fight really starts, because I can guarantee you they're going to be the first guys to run away. I'm not saying you're going to be the one, Joe, but I can look at these bright politicians. It's wonderful ideas until somebody lights a match and starts killing each other. These are problems that you can best avoid, and you can do it through discourse and dialogue. And as for the ANC, they were actually prepared to settle for a federalist state before 1994, right, when they wanted to negotiate. I think there was a proposal on the table. They were prepared to negotiate for that. But later on, as the politicians went, we went for a unitary state. So, yeah, I mean, I don't believe that everyone inside the ANC is resistant to negotiation and change. I do believe there's still a pragmatic side. There is a very strong ideological side, unfortunately, right? And you want the pragmatists to be forced sort of by the people, by the hand of history. Don't go and talk and negotiate with them, but create a reality, and then they find that practically they have to give and concede power.
Yeah, I don't know about that latter point. I actually disagree with that. I don't think you have a pragmatic ANC. I mean, you got to remember, these people look at the Western Cape as a cash cow. The only reason why they wouldn't want this to happen is not for... I mean, I even introduced it as being ideology. Damn it. Sorry. There's a massive spider here, and he keeps running away when I'm like about to crush his ass. Where was I? Listen to me killing, what was it? Charlotte up in here.
Yeah, you're talking about the ideology of the ANC, right?
Sorry about that. I digress. I don't think it will even necessarily be ideology that gets in the way of the ANC not wanting this. It'll just simply be the math and the numbers. We live in a situation where, as things stand, the fiscus has shrunk to the point where a lot of the socialist lofty ideas the ANC comes up with, they simply cannot afford. And on that basis, if you look at it per capita, the Western Cape has some of the more affluent people in the society, and they just wouldn't want to lose that. That's the irony of these cadres, as Dumo and them often say on the show. Cadres always pretend that they don't need quote-unquote white monopoly capital or wealthy people regardless of race, but in reality they're not dumb. They know that they need that cash if either A, they themselves are to be able to afford the welfare, which placates the poor and prevents that sort of revolutionary behavior that you allude to, Hugo, or B, preserves their own wealth as the political elites, because that's where they get their money from. The ANC and political elites produce nothing in this country. Those people who do produce are those of us who are in the private sector, who are taxed heavily, and those taxes often then pay for the elite lifestyles of politicians and their elites. So I'm mindful of this debate, and with that being said, Hugo, I'm going to hold you to some of your points, because I want to invite the independence guys, the secessionists, the various camps of them, whether it's your Jack Millers, your remind me please of the other fella. I've had him on here.
Phil Craig.
For the life Phil Craig. Shout out to you, Phil. Sorry for forgetting your name, homie. And various other organizations that have been at the forefront of this. And I'd love to see this debate being had out. Because I think Hugo does raise a lot of important points that must be grappled with, especially given the propensity to violence that this can take. Speaking about violence, the time is violently marching on. Unless anybody has any final comments on this one, I'm going to move us on.
I just
Joe, yeah.
One very quick thing. I think what would be very cool to see is to have someone like Phil Craig or Jack Miller come on to show with Hugo and someone else that also disagrees and has the same opinions or think, because I'm not a spokesperson for them.
No, for
I
sure.
just know what they're allowing me to say and what they tell me. So yeah, I just wanted to make that very clear. Like, I don't want people to think that I'm some kind of spokesperson for the Cape Independence movement or anything like that. I take the information as I get it from them and what they're allowing me to say, or what they
Absolutely
basically tell me.
And I think that would be a great debate, and I'm going to ask Hugo to be a part of that when I do set it up. I'm gonna speak to the fellas and organize it. With that being said, let's move on, fellas. The other thing that we saw this week, it does link to the previous topic in a sense. Sorry, let me see how I introduce this. You now have a situation in this country where, Joe said it quite nicely earlier on. There is a hashtag FootTech ANC ethos that is developing, and it's developing in communities, not just on social media. It's developing in communities in a very real way, where we've seen this past week the ANC receive a very cold reception in parts of the country. An unverified report of a cold shoulder given to the president in Katlehong as he was campaigning, in that part of the world. There is a video that I tried to prepare to put up here, but it just wouldn't allow me to put it up. But he's doing some sort of talk in like a...
Oh, what happened there? We just hijacked the show.
Yeah. He'll be back.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is my show
welcome,
now. No,
welcome to Joe Emilio's show, and co-hosted by Dumo Denga.
There he is.
There we go.
Sorry,
What the hell was
we
that?
stole your show for a minute. I don't know what happened there.
What the hell was that? So it was like Facebook and YouTube saying, "Shut up, Wena, shut up. We've had enough of you and your liberty." Yeah, the spider got me. Is what Graham is saying.
See, the people in the comments are blaming me already.
Yeah. But I was making the point, and let me just get straight into it. The ANC is coming under a lot of pressure in this upcoming local government election, and they're seeing this as they campaign around the country. And it wasn't just in Katlehong, as an example. The Umgeni municipality, the ANC saw a very cold reception in that part of the world, where they were even just being booed and shooed away. And it seems to be commonplace, around the country. Here, Mlazi, where I live, those of us who are pissed off at the water shedding that the eThekwini municipality seems to be doing, where it shuts off the water supply every evening, people were basically asking ANC councillors, please explain yourselves. Why should we vote for you when we're not enjoying a decent level of service delivery? Dumo, let me come to you. We've been saying that, it'll eventually come to this.
Yeah, I think a lot of citizens in South Africa have probably woken up to the rhetoric of the ANC. They realize that, look, at the end of the day, it's not really about, if it's the party of Nelson Mandela or, 1994 and so forth. They are more concerned about, well, is my electricity working? Can I get water and so forth and so forth. And because of this, I think the cold reception that they got in various places around South Africa is not a surprise. I think this is something that is inevitable, and I think it will show in the polls as well. And the ANC knows this, and at some point, there has to be someone within the ANC that's going to have to stand up and say, listen, we can't continue like this any longer, because if we continue down this road, this movement is going to grow. The movement of anti-ANC is going to grow. So there has to be some sort of way in which they can try to recover from this, if they can, but I hope they don't. But but it's good to see citizens in South Africa. The spider's gone now, right? So it's good that Well, what I think should happen rather is that it's good that South Africans are waking up to this. A lot of South Africans are pissed off. And let's just hope that this actually reflects in the polls as well. But it's good to see that people are saying, listen, we get it. You're only going to come give us KFC and a T-shirt and then come back 5 years later. So it's good to see that.
And there was a particular comment I saw making that exact point, Dumo, to say that stuff these guys, man, stuff the KFC, stuff the T-shirts, stuff the food hampers. I'll take all three, but my ass is not voting for the ANC. Joe, pardon me. Joe, it does seem as though what began in the Western Cape is beginning to spread in other parts of the country, where people are saying, you know what, it's okay to not vote ANC. And we're seeing two broad trends so far. Number one, a more concerning one, is the growing voter apathy. The number of people who just simply are not voting. A chap who crunches these numbers and is very good on these topics, Davy Skoltz, basically show that in this last voter registration weekend, the voters' roll actually shrank by as much as 700,000 voters, is I think the numbers he cited. Is this not the trend we're perhaps going to see going forward?
Well, I hope so. I think, I saw that article, and I also saw Center for Risk Analysis also gave out their own poll as well, showing the same story. ANC, the CRA basically did their own polling showing that ANC's support has gone down 50%. Now, I must stress that this is not a prediction of what's going to happen. It's just a snapshot in our current time at this time and how people feel at this moment. And it's 50% on the dot with a 4% margin of error. So it could be 54, it could be 46%. But we're definitely seeing this big trend. I don't know if it necessarily started in the Western Cape, but what I do know, this kind of started, in my opinion, this hashtag Futsek ANC movement kind of started on Twitter, actually, on social media, where, and I remember the Daily Maverick doing an article on it. They wanted to figure out where exactly did this hashtag start, where did it come from, who's behind it, if possible. And they did an intense research on it. And it was all organic because people on social media started to do hashtag Futsek ANC Fridays. And then it just started to become an everyday thing where we just hashtag ANC, Futsek ANC for anything, like whether it be millions being stolen, it's load shedding again, whatever the case may be, to use that hashtag. And it's grown and grown and grown. And it's gotten to the point where people are now, you have billionaires coming out in interviews saying, we need to get rid of the ANC. The ANC is destroying this country. And a lot more people are criticizing the ANC. They're hurtful. It's just as simple as that. People all over South Africa are hurtful of the ANC, and they've been stealing and abusing the South African people for at least the past 20 years, if not 27 years. And I think people are finally starting to wake up.
Absolutely. Hugo, again, not to prosecute this issue to death, but I mean, we've kind of been saying for a very long time now that the greatest impediment, aside from apathetic voters, and I just put up a comment here by Graham McTaggart, saying, apathy in and of itself isn't that bad because more civilians are just checking out of the political process because they know, that salvation doesn't lie with that way, or with these politicians, presumably. Which is a valid point, but I mean, there's something to be said here about seemingly people who, have deep emotional ties to the ANC actually saying, you know what, maybe in this election, I'm not going to vote in that direction at all. That it's actually quite okay, and almost political maturity that's developing in the country, where people are saying it's okay to switch votes to something that might work. Are we maybe seeing a maturity in that regard? Or is just, I don't know. What's your take on this?
Maybe I would just say, for public record, I'm one of those people that didn't vote in the last election because I was staying 500 kilometers from the South African embassy, and I was like, should I travel that far to vote for people I don't like anyways? And that's kind of what I felt like. And I said, no, I'm rather going to drink a beer with that money. So yeah, I'm on record for writing about it, and I was saying on Rational Standard that I didn't vote in the last election. I thought it was a total, they take your intelligence for granted, the political parties, right?
Yeah.
They come with a Mandela banner and a Steve Biko slogan, and it's 1994 again in the Rainbow Nation, the Castle Lager ads, and then they say, vote for us, please, and we're going to promise you heaven on earth. I think a lot of people feel this fed up at the moment. What I think is happening in a broader picture, though, basically, is the ANC support base is just dying. They're much older. They're just dying as we speak, right? And the younger generation, we get our news not through the same propagandistic SABC that has got 3 channels and 2 boring Easy Dingo shows. No, we get it from YouTube and Twitter and Facebook. And the average person's a bit more informed. And they realize also that I don't have to buy this rubbish anymore. Right? I don't have to buy this nonsense. And I don't have to vote. Actually, I think not voting is sometimes a moral obligation as well, to tell the people, this is how little we think of you politicians, right? You're a politician. You go to Cape Town and make laws that I don't care about. Like, please bugger off while I try and run my life and figure out my own problems for myself. And I hope if more people take the skeptical attitude towards authority, I think it'll be a much better country. And I don't believe whatever new political party with a new PR campaign and a new vision of hope for the future is going to solve any of these grand issues. They will be solved individually, locally, family, community. I think you speak a lot about family on this show. That is the mindset I think people need to take. The idea that a great politician is going to come and give me something, if it works, if Mr. Winde figures out the BRT system in Cape Town one day and they happen to get a nice blue train to Cape Town again, sure, that's nice. We have a politician that does something for a change. Otherwise, you know what? It's irrelevant in a sense. And you should take the view that politicians should be as irrelevant to your life as possible. Like, the more irrelevant you make them, the better the country will be. You're muted, Sigler.
Sorry about that. I was actually trying to share a screen for the next segment. But guys, I must agree, and maybe pardon me. Actually, guys, hold on. I need to blow my nose so badly.
All right. Well, we continue the show over here.
Yeah.
Dumo, any thoughts?
Are we voting in the next election? Like, actually, the DA needs to pay me to vote for them. I think that's what I feel. That's what I feel like. Like, I mean, if they can get rebates to people for vaccines or vaccine passports, they can give me a rebate if I vote for them. Then I might consider it. That's what I feel like at the moment.
Well, I'm gonna vote. I don't know for who yet, but I am gonna vote. I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is and try and use what's left of democracy in this country, if there is any.
Look, it works. Look, if a political party comes in, they say they're going to charge me less in taxes, but nobody has said that so far. I might consider it, but at the moment, it's not what I want.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that, guys. I still have a lingering, I don't know what to call it. I think it's flu or sinusitis, blah, 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 bit of a cough and sniffles. I think even as I watch the comment section here, guys, there is a disgust South Africans have with the political elites generally. My fear, though, even as we say this, both on the side of the apathy towards the ANC and the shrinking voters' roll, is that parties that have zealots in them, zealots who they're able to bring out to vote, will seem to become bigger, even though the reality is the voters' roll is just shrinking, but they're able to get their guys consistently to come out and vote. And to this effect, parties like the EFF are going to look like they've become bigger, but in reality, they've just managed to hold on to their base, and a base in which they're able to bring out to vote. Dumo, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we have to understand. Democracy is a numbers game. So if political parties can actually get people into the polls and get them to vote, and they get the most amount of votes, then they win, So we need to understand that. So look, I mean, political apathy, in one sense, it works in the sense that people can just go on and, carry on with their own lives and so forth, and it kind of makes the ruling party or the democratic system irrelevant. However, the people that do win the election are still going to try and play by those rules. And so even if less people are on the voters' roll, they're going to say, well, we still got the majority of votes, therefore the the seats in parliament and whatever have to be divided accordingly to what the rules actually state. So I think we must just understand that they're going to still carry on playing the game, even though some people may not want to play it. That's not to say that you must go vote and everything, but I do recommend that people do go vote, because again, at the end of the day, the politicians have their own objectives, and some of them being nefarious, and we need to stop them in their tracks. But again, apathy.
They're selling voting like vaccination. You don't really need it, most of us, but I do recommend that you do go and do it. It's sort of the same argument.
Well,
That's debatable.
Good one.
Folks, we're in the last 23 minutes of the show. Welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. I am keeping an eye on the comment section, guys. If you have any questions yourselves, please pop them through. I'll put them on screen and I'll put it to our guests on here. What I was trying to get on screen is a video clip that surfaced from the past week and a half, actually. It's a little bit old now, but it's one which I think spoke to how people are beginning to see or question, pardon me, and this is why I'm bringing it up. This week, of course, the President of the Republic, one Cyril Ramaphosa, came onto our screens and basically announced that we're heading down to a level 1 lockdown, right? Which sees an easing of restrictions and all that good nonsense and all that good jazz. But the question two distinct segments of South African society asked were as follows. The one who've basically said, screw this lockdown, we're no longer following, which includes many residents of the township I live in, said, oh, there's still a lockdown? Is what they basically asked as the president was speaking. And of course, the middle class in this country, who are the most compliant to the lockdown grift, were saying, oh, yes, Cyril is fantastic. He's put us down to level 1. He's following the science. Those seem to be, broadly speaking, I mean, I trivialize them, but those two were the two sort of broad responses to level 1. And the comments I made this week in a vlog as he was speaking was actually, in real terms, this lockdown has nothing to do with the science and actually everything to do with the politics. Now the politicians and the political elites want to be able to go out and canvass and campaign and not heed the artificial number limits that they impose on this. And because they want to do this, we now head to level 1. But here's the problem, guys, and this is what I wanted to show. There are more South Africans now, especially other interest groups and the religious leaders in particular, who are saying to hell with this lockdown and to hell with the ANC. Now, let me try and get it on screen. Please bear with me, guys. It's going to be a slight challenge, but I want to show you what I'm talking about, which happened here in Durban about a week and a half ago. So you'll see exactly what I'm talking about when I say that there are people now who are saying to hell with this lockdown. And before I do that, let me say shout out to you, Deborah Olafia, for the 140 Rand super chat. And her message, of course, is Futak ANC. Shout out to you, Deborah. I see you, girl. Let me get that image on screen and you'll see exactly what I am talking about. Let's see if this works. Pardon me, guys. I'm trialing something I don't often use, but I will pull it off. I will pull it off. There you have it. Easily, Hugo, between 50 to 80,000 people who are part of the Nazareth Baptist Church, or commonly known as the Shembe Church here in South Africa, who just took to the streets. Now, the issue itself had nothing to do with lockdown. It was more one faction of the church, because it's currently going through a bit of a internal ruction. But the point is this: the one faction of the church showing muscle and saying to hell with the other faction, we have the largest numbers. But in doing so, inadvertently breaking lockdown rules, which basically back then said no more than 500 people gathered. Well, there's more than 50 to 80,000 over there. I mean, there is an awakening, Hugo, isn't there, to people just saying, you know what, we're happy to challenge these lockdown rules, especially if politicians are doing it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's hypocrisy, right? But look, the churches have always gotten away with this nonsense. Not just the churches, the mosques as well. I was in Iran 2-3 months ago. And yeah, it's supposed to be locked down, but religious festivals aren't cancelled. They just get a free pass. Black Lives Matter protests in America, they just get a free pass, right? So it seems to me that if you've got a cause, which is climate, black, religion, God, anything of this great, wonderful sounding stuff, you can get away with breaking the law. And for ordinary people, it's go screw yourself. Of course, you get exempted if you're a politician, if you're Gavin Newsom and you sit in the French Laundry, the most expensive hotel or most expensive restaurant in California. And guess what? Californians voted against for him. People ask me why I don't care about voting. Well, that's it. A guy screws you in your face, and then you go and vote for him again. So, yeah, I don't really know what to say other than I expected this. I expect hypocrisy. And the churches and the religious people will always get away with this because they have more numbers, basically.
Absolutely. Let me come to Joe, then you, Dumo, because there was something interesting that I observed here. And Joe, you made the point of air. When it comes to the Cape Town protesters, there was the potential of a state violence insofar as a water cannon was sent and the like. And thankfully, the SAPS' incompetence, which basically saw avoiding the worst over there. But there is something to be said about the government that picks and chooses when to enforce laws, whether those laws are asinine or not, as is the case with these lockdown regulations. There is something to be said about the state that picks and chooses who to beat up using the police. When it's the elderly, pensioners, in this case, the anti-vaccine passport types, then sure, why not? Let's send the police, if not to intimidate, but if not to intimidate, then to actually harass and to beat up. But if it's the EFF or the ANC, or in this case, I'm going to use a term, they don't like it, but just for the sake of being short, the Shembe Church, then we'll leave them alone because those are far scarier constituencies to mess with.
Yeah, it's confusing to some degree. I mean, I think Hugo was right in saying that if you have a cause, if you are part of like this, Black Lives Matter or whatever have you, you're kind of untouchable. And also the virus doesn't care. You're not going to be, you're not going to get infected and all that stuff. And some people would argue, even like in KZN, that there were no water cannons in KZN. I remember seeing one picture. I could be wrong though. But anyway, to your point, BDL, and to what I said earlier, what was really upsetting about seeing a water cannon there where there's protesters who have a right to protest, especially now under lockdown level 1 and are well under 2,000 people. This week, there was ANC rallies, EFF rallies. There were people not social distancing at all, not wearing masks as well. And there was not one water cannon. I don't even think I saw a police officer present at those rallies. So again, it's that whole do as I say, but not as I do kind of vibe. And there were unconfirmed reports, so please take this with a pinch of salt. There were unconfirmed reports that the president himself told the SAPS to shut the protest down. I cannot confirm this. I cannot verify this. However, I gotta be honest, I wouldn't be surprised. And it just goes to show you the just the double standard that exists now. And I just hope that people will keep on fighting and pointing out these hypocrisies. And I encourage everybody that wants to protest against something, go ahead, protest, because the more people that protest, the better it's going to be, and maybe we'll get our freedoms back.
Absolutely. Dumo, that last point, though, I must agree with, insofar as, even as I showed that image of the Nazareth Baptist Church, Abarashembe, taking to the streets and those sort of numbers, I personally have no problem with that. I've already said it on the show, for example, that I personally will not comply with this lockdown. I no longer comply with it. I walk into venues without a mask and all of that nonsense, and people get really upset. Actually, no, correction, I'm lying. They don't really get upset. People sort of look at me and they're like, is he really doing this? And then they're like, okay, whatever, he's already here, so might as well serve him. And if anything, the one person who will try and sort of puts, ask you to put a mask on or whatever is the security guard. The guy who's earning minimum wage, made to stand at the door with a hand sanitized spritzer. The guy really couldn't be bothered that much about this. And the other thing I've noticed, Dumo, I want to speak to, the police themselves too, the guys who police the beat, who patrol our streets, they're not really stopping people and trying to enforce mask wearing and social distance because I think they themselves realize I have bigger criminality to deal with than some goggle who either is not covering her nose while she wears a mask, or some fat black dude with a yarmulke on his head not wearing a mask at all. I think cops kind of realize the lockdown grift is exactly that. It's a grift.
Right. One thing that I remember on one of our shows, on the Manpatria podcast, and Zuzo was telling us that, like, where he was staying, people were just not complying. They weren't wearing masks, breaking the curfew and stuff like that. So I think it has got to the point where it's just like, there's a lockdown, but so what? And that's why you saw at the Nazareth Baptist Church, they went out and did it. I'm pretty sure one of them said, hey, what about the lockdown? They're like, you know what? There's bigger things in the lockdown, and they went ahead and did it. And I think that's really, or someone may even have said, listen, they can't arrest, like, how many people at that march? Like 8,000? I don't know, but they say they can't arrest all of us. How much was it?
But they had God on their side, so they can break it, right?
It was closer to 80, the top estimate was 80,000 people. They literally, that entire street, all the way back.
80,000 people.
There could have at least been between 50 to 80,000 people. There's a very, very large throng of people.
So I bet the one who actually organized the protest, or not all the march, sorry, I said, look, they can't arrest all 50, 60,000 of us. They can't put us all in vans, really. So, and I think that's what came up. And I think even from the government's perspective, they said, look, don't touch the Nazareth Baptist Church. It's not going to look good on us, because they want to save face. And I'm talking about the government when they're thinking about this. But when it comes to other things like, the anti-mask mandates and stuff like that, I mean, if it is true that the president said that the protest must be shut down, then I'm not surprised by that as well. They're just being selective, and they're just using whatever methods they can to actually shut down what they don't want to see. And it's nothing surprising. This governments have been doing this for a very long period of time. And it's just something that probably will get more attention along the way. But yeah, it's good to see that people are tired of this. I think there's a lot of people that want to see more of this, but they don't want to be the sore thumb. So they just hoping that enough people break the lockdown regulations, and they'll say, well, look, I mean, there's already hundreds of them breaking it. I might as well break it too. So I think it's getting to that point, but people are getting tired of it, and they are over it.
Absolutely. Fellas, I'm going to wrap up the conversation. But before I do, just to ask for last comments, please. And even as you give us your last comment, what will you be looking at in the week ahead? Are you writing a piece? Let us know, please. And of course, how do the folks reach you, including, by the sounds of Hugo, a podcast that he now has. Hugo?
Yeah, so that you can follow my podcast on Odyssey. It's my name and surname. Tomorrow, I am speaking to somebody on an alternative theory of cancer, right? The chromosomal imbalance theory of cancer as opposed to gene mutations. It's going to be interesting. It's somebody who says we've got what we understand about cancer, we've got all wrong. So that's the thing I'm looking into. Other than that, I've actually not got much going on. Speaking to Noam Chomsky in November on my podcast, if somebody wants to listen to the most wokest, greenest person on earth, I suppose you can come and join that conversation.
Mhm.
And
The old white male version of Greta Thunberg. Shout out to you, Hugo.
well, he's a nice guy. Like he's on a personal level, he's a very nice person, but he's just too extreme on some things, right? But anyways, it's worth listening to what he has to say, I guess. What he said in the past
Absolutely.
against terrorism and stuff was correct. Now he swallowed the woke pill. But either way, I'm speaking to him in November 2 or 3, I think it is. So yeah, that's a long-term schedule. And yeah, other than that, not much going on, just writing a little bit. And I'll finish with, I'm just saying, we all know the governments are lying. We all know this entire narrative has already collapsed. It was dead on arrival, to be honest. The virus is not spreading when there's a protest, it spreads when it goes up. And just to saying to people that are scared, people have to die, right? Unfortunate fact of life. And to make people worry about death, you're being dishonest. And that's sort of the basis of this whole thing. So yeah, I'll end with those comments.
Shout out to you, Hugo Kruger, of course, and the Hugo Kruger Show. Dumo, I'm going to come to you because there's a comment on screen, indeed, speaking to when are we going to see more of those Austrian perspective videos? And what will you be looking at in the week ahead on the Manpatria Show?
Yes. So those of you who have been following us on the Manpatria podcast, we haven't released one in like the last 3 weeks, but what we have done is we have made up for it with daily live streams. So we do live streams like there'll be one tomorrow at 6 o'clock. We try to do it like almost every day. But once the Manpatria podcast will come back soon, and also the Austrian perspective videos will also come back soon as well. It's just that a lot of things are happening. Schedules are not really kind to me right now. So we're just going to have to keep the Austrian perspective on hold. But definitely you will be able to interact with me from tomorrow on YouTube. We have a call-in show, so guys can call in. You know, we're also on Telegram as well. So that's what I'll be working on in the next few weeks. And yeah, man, just if you want to see more of my stuff, please go to manpatria.com and you'll find everything there.
Absolutely. That's Dumo Denga, the host of the Manpatria Show. Speaking about another host, Joe Emilio. Joe, what can we expect on your show this week, homie?
Well, I am hopefully going to speak to a spokesperson from Action SA. Action Society SA. Very big difference there. And they're going to talk to me hopefully about the DNA backlog. They're going to give me a very intense and detailed update on the DNA backlog. I'll be pre-recording that interview and releasing it in a 10 to 15 minute snippet. Just getting a whole update on how messy it is at SAPS, and we're going to be dealing with a whole lot of other stuff as well with regards to DNA and forensics and stuff like that. So that's going to be interesting. Other than that, guys, if you want to see that video that we spoke about earlier about the water cannon being not working at the protest, please go check out my channel, subscribe to BDL, like this video, share it far and wide. And thanks for having me on the show, and I'll see you guys soon. Hugo, pleasure chatting to you. And Dumo, it's always good to see you again.
Awesome. Thank you very much to all of my panelists. That's Dumo Denga, Hugo Kruger, and of course, Joe Emilio. And of course, thank you, dear viewer, for watching. As always, it is very nice to have you guys on the Sunday show. Remember, please don't forget, even as you're watching me wrap up, hit that like button, guys. It really helps. It pushes this content out to a much wider audience who are then able to engage on these ideas. You hear news, analysis, and opinion on this show that you'll get nowhere else. With that being said, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on Wednesday for the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Still trying to decide what to do for that one. I might bring you images and do a bit of a citywide tour of the destruction from the July riots. There's still empty carcasses of buildings around this town, city, and province as people are struggling to rebuild and others just choosing not to rebuild at all, to be honest. So I might bring you that for the Wednesday show and also talk to some residents to find out whether life is harder or easier after those Zuma riots. So look forward to that on Wednesday on the BDL show. And yeah, with that being said, thanks again for watching. I'll see you on Wednesday for the BDL show. And a reminder, as I always do at the end of every show, for you to never trust a commie.